Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of us that are around the world. My name is Derek Melber, and for myself and all of the team members on the AD Solutions team, I just want to extend a very, very warm welcome and thank you so much for taking your time today to spend some time with us. I think we have a really good topic today, and we're pretty excited to share some information with you. Today we're going to be talking about something that I have been really focusing on over the last 10 years, and we as an organization have really tried to start creating solutions over the last 2 years for organizations that run Active Directory, and that is focusing in on security. And security obviously touches many aspects of what we do on a daily basis, but we want to focus primarily today and some of the inner workings of Active Directory and your Windows servers, wanting to make sure that some basics as well as some of the more integral parts of your Windows environment are actually secured. So we really want to give you some things that you can walk away with, as well as some resources that you can refer back to. Just to give you a little bit of information about who I am, as I mentioned, my name is Derek Melber. I am currently an Active Directory MVP. I've been an MVP now for, gosh, I think 15, 16 years, and I've jumped back and forth between Active Directory and group policy, and recently, for the last year and a half, I've been on the Active Directory side. You have my resource there, which is my email address. That's the best resource you can have. And we also have some other resources that I wanted to point out to you. We only have about 45 to 50 minutes of your time today, but we have some information that's available that's absolutely free to consume. You don't even have to put information about yourself, but we think it's very valid information for you to go out and get them information. The first thing I want to point you to is our blog. Now, if you go to our main page, manageengine.com, and you go to Community, and under Community, you go to Blogs, you'll see that there's an Active Directory blog. This is a blog that either myself or someone from the team has updates every single week. And what we try to do is we try to just give you information for things that are pressing, things that are complicated, things that will help you become more efficient in your organization. The latest one, as you see here, is related to Office 365. I just got back from a trip to India, and I was working with different coworkers, and we were talking about this concept of Office 365, and I thought it was confusing enough to write a blog on it. So that's all this particular blog is about. So that gives you an idea that we're not only writing about our tools and solutions, we also write about other things. The other thing that I want to talk about, which is really the main foundation for today, is our security hardening site. And what I want to do is I want to talk to you kind of in general about security hardening, and then I want to get into specifics, and I want to set it up by kind of walking you through the reason we put this site together. Now, the site is a little bit complex to find, so if you actually go to, again, our main page, manageengine.com, and you click on Active Directory, in the lower right-hand corner of the drop-down that appears, you'll see this security hardening for Active Directory. Now, this particular site was developed by our team, and really the main reason that this site was developed was because of some technologies that Microsoft is talking about and now has implemented. And actually, if you want to see kind of the foundation, the foothold for why we put this page together, please go and watch this video. This video is very intriguing, very important for you to understand and know kind of what Microsoft is looking for in the future of Active Directory security. And just to give you an introduction to two different terms that Microsoft has now with regard to security, one is called JIT, just in time, and the other is called JIA, just enough access. And both of these technologies are what Microsoft is pushing forward for with regard to securing your Windows environment. Now, when we watched the video, when we looked at the technologies, we felt that some of the technologies were not really efficient, was forcing organizations to spend more money than what they should have spent, and also they just didn't fit into the normal daily activities for most organizations from what we saw. So what we did is we took much of the information that we've been working on over the last years, and we put it together into an easy-to-consume environment. And if you go to the bottom of this security hardening page, you'll see all these areas with regard to security hardening. Now, if you just pick on one, let's pick on Active Directory delegation, you will see that we have multiple blogs and videos that talk about that concept. And really the overall goal of what we want to do with everything that's in here with regard to all of these security areas is we want you to have a way to get the information that you need with regard to security hardening. So let's move on and let's talk about kind of what is security hardening and what is our view of security hardening, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you examples of how you can put what we're going over into action. So let's first of all talk about traditional security hardening. Now, traditional security hardening is the idea that there's going to be a project, okay? So let's say your boss, whoever's in charge of IT or whoever's in charge of Active Directory says, all right, for the next month, we are going to focus on making sure that our domain controllers and our primary Windows servers are secure. Now, as administrators, we know that when we spin up a Windows server, we take particular time to secure that server. And when we put that server in production, there are certain security settings that are in place on that server. Now, we can be honest with one another. Sometimes those security settings are really good, sometimes they're mediocre, and sometimes they're barely just enough. But regardless of the state of a server when it's put into production, we all know that over time things change. So when we start talking about security hardening, it's because we as an organization, we as an entity of administrators and security professionals feel as if we need to make sure that things are secure. So how do we do this? Okay, so it's day one on our project of security hardening of our Windows servers, and we need to find out what we have. So we run reports. So we go to each of the servers that are in scope of our security hardening project, and we run reports on all the different security areas that we deem to fit under security hardening. Now, instead of just kind of walking through that list, what does that list look like? Well, if we go back to our security hardening website, that would be local users and groups, Active Directory users and their configurations, user management, AD groups, user rights, delegation, group policy delegation, password management, and the like. So you will see that we have all the security areas broken down for you so that when you get to this reporting point, you know exactly what you're going to go after. Okay, so you take 2-3 days and you gather reports on your Windows servers. Now that you have the current configuration of your Windows servers and the security areas, you need to analyze to make sure that those settings are correct. Well, what does analysis look like? Well, analysis is going to be really a multitude of things. First, it could be compliance regulations. Second, it could be best practices. Third, it could be what is possible for your environment for that security setting for the servers and the network communication to still function. So analysis isn't as easy as we might think, and really the analysis in all three of these steps can be the most complicated piece. So we're going to take each of those areas and we're going to analyze them to determine what is the best possible security setting that we can have for each of those areas that we run reports on. Now that we analyze the information, we configure. So we use group policy, we use potentially scripts, we use tools, we use whatever it takes to efficiently configure all the security areas with the correct analyzed security settings on all of the servers that are in the security hardening project. So at the end of the month, once we have everything configured, we check off that project and we're done. But this is where the problem lies. And if you go back and watch the video that's on that security hardening page, the Microsoft product manager is talking about how most organizations don't know who has privileges in Active Directory. And the reason is, even though you put production servers in place that are secure, even though you go through security hardening projects, you have drift. So traditional security hardening puts everything in place, but then you walk away. And the fact that you walk away and you no longer worry about security on those servers means that other administrators in the organization, those that have delegation in the administration, installation of applications, everything that occurs potentially can modify the security settings that you thought were in place. So even a day later, even though you spent a month making sure that security was in place for your domain controllers and your servers, you have drift. So we as an organization took a look at this and said, all right, how can we help organizations better understand security and better maintain security so that their security hardening steps are kept in place? Well, we did that by adding 2 more steps. The first 3 steps are critical, okay? And as we're going to move along here, we're going to see that the first 3 steps aren't always as obvious as we might think. But really what I have seen, and I've spent a tremendous amount of time over the last 2.5 years focusing on this, is that every organization spends time on the first 3 steps, but very little time on the last 2 steps. But just take a step back, okay? Close your eyes even, imagine with me. Imagine you just focus on Active Directory privileged groups. You go into enterprise admins, domain admins, schema admins, SharePoint, Exchange admins. You go to every single possible administrative group you have in Active Directory, and you configure them to be exactly what they need to be. Okay? You with me so far? Great. That's the first 3 steps. If you walk away and then the next week you run a report on who's in domain admins, someone could have been added to that group that you weren't aware of. So let's go back to the day that you configured your domain admins. And instead of walking away and not worrying about it, how about if you set up monitoring of when the domain admins group changes membership? So now you are tracking when the domain admins group changes membership. Not only are you going to track it, you are going to set up an alert such that if the domain admins group changes membership in any way, someone is added or someone is removed from the group, you receive an immediate email. So in a week from now, when you run a report to know who's in domain admins, it should match exactly what you configured and what your alerts say. And if you look at all the areas of Active Directory security, all the areas of your Windows servers, and you set up monitoring and alerting as well as the foundation, right, the baseline of security, nothing gets changed without you knowing it. This is a way that you and your organization can stay on top of security of your Windows environment. So what does this look like? Well, this looks like this, all right? Let's just take one example from our security hardening list. We're going to pick on the password policy, okay? Now, the password policy seems basic, but it's not as basic as we think. I have been an MVP in Active Directory since Active Directory came out. And in those 16 years, I still find and I'm not going to throw out a percentage, I'm just going to say a majority percentage of auditors and administrators that do not report on the password policy correctly. Now, if we go back to our list, the very first step is to report. So, as I show you here, we need to report on the password policy. Now, if I could actually ask one of you, which it's very difficult in a webinar, if I could ask one of you, all right, here is my domain controller, right? So let's go back to the desktop here. So here's my domain controller. What I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and generate a report for your domain password policy. Now, what I find is that most administrators do this. They go to Administrative Tools, Group Policy Management. They go up here to the default domain policy. They do a settings report. They go to security settings, password policy, and they take a screen capture of this. Now, some of you are saying, yep, that's exactly what I do. Some of you are saying, no, that's not good enough. For those of you that say, this is what I do, I'm begging you to stop doing this. And in reality, I'm going to beg you to stop running GPO reports for any security setting that you have in place. Because what we are looking at right here is nothing more than a report from a file. It's just a file. You have no clue if this file of settings is actually in place. And what you should be reporting on for the password policy is exactly what is in place, not what could be in place. So what is the proper method to report on the password policy? Well, certainly it's nothing in group policy management. Okay? Well, I'll come back to that. It potentially could be. Okay? My recommendation and our recommendation for the password policy report is to go run a tool that's built into every single Windows machine, server and workstation, seccpol.msc. SecPol gives you a security policy report of the current security settings. So you will see here that we have a radically different view of what's going on for the password policy than what we reported. This right here in the forefront, right, in the lower left corner, this is what is actually in place. This is what the report was. So now I'm going to go back to the reality of the idea, the concept of the 5 steps. If you don't do step 1 correct, which is reporting, I guarantee you everything after that is worthless. Because if you don't have the correct security settings that are in place and you're analyzing incorrect settings, then it doesn't matter what you put in place. So what we need to do first is understand that reporting is at the core of security hardening. And you have to run the right reports. Okay? Now, I did mention that you can't run group policy management, but you actually can. If you go down to the bottom and you do group policy results, and you focus on a domain controller, server 100 is a domain controller, and you run a group policy result there, it will actually be correct. So you'll see here that if I go to settings, actually let's run a new report, group policy reports wizard. If I run group policy here, I go to my security settings, my password policy, you will see that it's here and it actually tells me which group policy set that. So you will see that I have a different GPO with higher precedence, and I'll show you that right here, right? My mystery GPO has a higher precedence than my default domain policy, which is why the report from the default domain policy isn't valid, okay? So back to our steps. First and foremost, you must report correctly on the security settings. But you also have to report thoroughly. Starting with Windows Server 2008, Microsoft added a new technology called fine-grained password policies. And these fine-grained password policies allow for multiple password policies in the same domain. But these password policies are not configured through group policy. So when I run the group policy results wizard, or I run secpol, it only reports on what's configured in group policy. So how do you run reports on fine-grained password policies? This becomes a little bit of a confusion. Well, you could go out and decrypt how to use PowerShell, but if I kind of show you what you're going to start with, you might change your mind in using PowerShell. So if I come in here and I use, let's see, let's go back to, let's see, where am I at here? Windows 2008, oh, here we go. So I'm going to come here to my Active Directory module, and I'm going to use the most powerful tool in PowerShell, which is get help, and I'm going to do password. Now you will notice that it has many results on the fine-grained password policy, but you will notice that it has a ... not telling you what it is. So you're going to be forced to go out to try to determine what even command to run to get this. Now, the result of this is going to be a little confusing, because the way that fine-grained password policies are controlled is that you assign groups to the Active Directory object that you create for the fine-grained password policies. So if I come in here to add C edit, and I come down to my system, and then I go to my password policies container, any object that I create here, you're going to have to modify the permissions to give the group access. Well, that's going to be very difficult to get that information out on a per user basis when you start talking about multiple password policies, multiple groups, users are in multiple groups. You see the confusion here? So what we have done is we've tried to help you with this, and we give you a tool that allows you to run these reports. So if you come into our AD Manager Plus tool and you run AD reports on users, you can get all users, the all users report, and you can generate it, and you will notice that there is a PSO applied column that you can add in. This PSO applied will be any password settings object that's applied to any of the users. So now you have a report per user of which password policy applies to them. You notice that I didn't have any password policies, fine-grained password policies configured. That's why all of these are a dash. Since all of these are a dash, which password policy is in place? That's correct. It's the one that secpol reported, which is this one. So as we go through this, what I'm trying to stress is, even though many of us have been Active Directory administrators for a long time, we may not be running the right reports. But in order for us to secure our environments, we have to run the right report. So lesson one is just make sure we're running the right report. What I recommend to all newer Active Directory admins is get the report in two different ways. That way you're double checking yourself. Run tests to make sure that the correct settings are in place. Okay? All right. So at this point, we've ran the report on both the password policy and the fine-grained password policy. So for the password policy, you can run secpol. We also have a GPO-based report for the domain, but secpol is so easy you can use that. When you start looking at your fine-grained password policies, this is a little more complex. So here you're going to have a tool to do that. And we feel that AD Manager Plus is a great tool for that because you can look at your PSO applied. So now you have to make determinations on what the password policy should be. This is the analysis piece. Now, with regard to the password policy, we recommend that you not only look at compliance. So many organizations have been attacked and successfully attacked because their password policy is poor or because they're not using the correct configurations. So we encourage you to really go out in the industry and look at passwords and some of the attacks on passwords and some of the suggestions on passwords. If nothing else, please go look at the Microsoft website on Pass the Hash. It gives you excellent recommendations on how to help secure your passwords for your users in Active Directory. Now that you have your password policy analyzed and you need to configure it, my recommendation is to go into the group policy results, make sure you're configuring the correct GPO, and update the password policy for what your organization needs. We recommend that you use fine-grained password policies or some solution that allows you to have multiple password policies in the same domain. The reason for this is we're going to recommend that especially administrators and your service accounts have more stringent password policies than any other user. Because these accounts have privileges, we want to secure these accounts more than the accounts that don't have privileges. So again, somehow, some way, after the analysis, you need to make decisions on how you're going to put your password policy in place. If you choose to use fine-grained password policies inside of your domain controller, you can go into etc edit, which again is here, etc edit, and you can set up fine-grained password policies by coming down here to System, Password Policies Container, and you create a new object. And I have written on this multiple times. There's some excellent articles on that, on how to set up your fine-grained password policies. Okay, where are we at? We're talking about the passwords, talking about password policies, fine-grained password policies. We've reported, we've analyzed, and we've configured. What do we do from here? Well, we need to monitor and alert. How do we monitor and alert? Well, we could go into our domain controller, because this is where the domain password policy is stored. And in our domain controller, we can set up auditing. So we come in here to a GPO, and we are going to set up in our environment, because this is a 2008 R2 domain controller, advanced auditing. So we come under advanced auditing, and we set up the audit policy. You can see I have this configured here. So anytime that we have directory service access, as well as we have object access, I'm going to track that. Then whatever is tracked shows up in your event viewer, in your security log. So here under security log, this actually puts the information for you for monitoring of the changes. But you need to be able to run reports. The last I checked, there is no report option here inside of Event Viewer. So how do you run reports on this? Well, after years of investigating this, and I do mean years, there is no option using Event Viewer. So our recommendation is to use a tool that's actually designed to do this, AD Audit Plus. Now watch this. Look how simple this is. I'm going to go to Reports. I'm going to come in here to My Reports, and I should have a report on password policy changes. In the last 24 hours, I don't have any. in the last 6 months, I have all of these. Now, you tell me how simple that is to be able to have a report in a time frame that you customize in such a way that you get to determine in a report a listing of every single change that's occurred for a particular setting and group policy, and you even know the details of what changed. Now that is awesome. Look at this. I have all these details that tell me exactly what changed for the GPO. This is extremely powerful. Then all you need to do is set up an alert in AD Audit Plus such that if you have your password policy, right there, domain password policy change, or you have a fine-grained password policy change, you receive an email. I can set up email notifications for any alert. Now, tell me that isn't better than trying to use this tool, which is impossible to do this. So now I'm going to go back, and I'm going to go back to this slide. Okay? The first 3 steps are essential, but if you aren't monitoring and alerting for the security settings that you put in place, you have no idea what you have. And if you don't know what you have, then you're not secure, because part of security is knowing what you have. So we feel, as an example I just gave you with the password policy, all 5 of these steps are essential. But you can't just stop at configuring them, because every single one of you that's on this webinar, I want you to think about this. I really want you to think about this. Who else in your organization has the ability to change security settings for Active Directory? Let me say that again. Who else in your organization has the ability to change security settings for Active Directory? If they have the ability, what are they going to do? They're going to make the change. So with each security area, you need to report, analyze, configure, monitor, and alert. And if you do this, you never are in the dark about what your security settings are. You now know what the security settings are. Okay? Now, that's just one example. If we look at other examples, okay? Let's look at authentication protocols. Now, let's make a rundown of what authentication protocols we have. We have LAN Manager. We have NTLM. We have NTLM v2, and we have Kerberos. Those are the 4 authentication protocols that we have in Active Directory. Okay? Now, let me make sure. I have a hand raised here. I want to make sure. We have some of my colleagues on the background making sure that everyone is being taken care of. I just want to make sure. Okay. So, if we look at our authentication protocols, which ones do we want to use? Well, we want to use Kerberos, and we want to use NTLM v2. We do not want to use NTLM, nor do we want to use LM, LAN Manager. But I'm here to tell you that these authentication protocols are supported in a default installation of Active Directory. They're supported because Microsoft wants all Active Directory installations to work. And they allow old, weak protocols to function so that your old applications just work. So this becomes an issue because LAN Manager and NTLM are easy to break. So what we need to do is first of all report on whether or not we're using LAN Manager. Okay? There are two LAN Manager security settings that all of us need to take a look at. Okay? One is related to the storage of LAN Manager hashes, and one is related to whether we are using LAN Manager or NTLM as an authentication protocol. How do we run these reports? Well, let's go back to my domain controller. Back in my domain controller, I'm going to get out of Event Viewer, and I'm going to go back to seccpol.msc. Now, why would I look at SecPol? My definition of SecPol is it provides the current security settings for all of these settings. And if I go to local policies, security options, and I go down in the list and I look for the storage of LAN Manager, it will tell me if LAN Manager hashes are being stored. And in this case, I am enabling the do not store. So I am not storing LAN Manager hashes. One report gives me the information. See how powerful reporting can be if you use the right report. Now, all of these settings here can potentially be pushed out through group policy. They don't have to be, but they could be. So if I go to the target machine that I'm running security reports on, SecPol tells me exactly what's in place. With regard to the second setting, LAN Manager and NTLM being used, I go down here to LAN Manager authentication level, and this tells me that I can send NTLM v2 responses only. But is that the best setting? Well, here's where we do the analysis. I know what I have, and if I come in here and I look at the potential settings, so I go to Policies, Windows Settings, Security Settings, Local Policies, Security Options, and I come down here to LAN Manager authentication level, you will see that there are 6 potential settings. Mine is set to right here, the 4th out of 6. You will notice that both 5 and 6 say refuse the authentication protocols we don't want to use. These are the 2 that we want. We actually want the bottom one. So our setting is not correct. So how do we analyze if we can set LAN Manager to be refused? We have to determine if LAN Manager is being used. Okay? How do we do that? Well, I'm going to give you a couple of solutions. First and foremost, we as an organization inside of our tool set give you the ability to run reports on, AD Audit Plus, to run reports on logons. Okay, so we're going to go to user logon activity over the last, let's go to April 2014, should work. And here you can see, oh, here we go, the logon service. Notice it says Kerberos. If it were LAN Manager, it would show up here as NTLM or LAN Manager. Now if I go to one of my, here, let's do a last 6 months for James Bond. Let's see, let's go. So notice here that I'm able to, in essence, get very detailed about who I'm looking for. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add these users. Let's see if this gets me the information that I need. And right here, I do not have any NTLM. Okay, but if I filter and I go down here, I can show you that I don't have any in that time frame for those users. Okay, So what you want to do is you want to pick all users, pick your time frame, which is probably the last 3 to 4 months, and see if you have any NTLM. Because what we are doing is we're pulling the information from the security log, and if NTLM was used, you're going to see it here, because we give you the ability to filter, we give the ability to look at particular entries to know if LAN manager is being used. Now, as a second option, you can also go in to Event Viewer, and inside of Event Viewer you can go to the Applications and Services logs, and inside of here you have a log for NTLM, and you can see if NTLM is being used. Now, the problem is you're going to have to drill into every single one of them to see who was using it, from where, and you'll see that I have over 2,000 entries. We give you reports. Microsoft doesn't give you reports. So you get to make that determination, okay? So the idea is you run a report, you do the analysis. With the analysis, you make the correct configuration. So here, if you're using NTLM, you're going to have to keep it. If you're not, you can get rid of it. So you go into group policy and you make the correct settings to either allow or deny LAN manager. Now, we're getting into a little bit of weeds here, aren't we? We're getting some pretty particular deep stuff. If you go to that security hardening site, all these details are out there. They're fully detailed for you on how to do this, okay? So I hope you're not frantically trying to write down everything, because our goal is just to educate you, and with education becomes documentation, and we have it all documented for you, okay? I just want you to understand the concepts. Once we have it configured properly, what do we need to do? Well, we just need to monitor and alert if someone tries to use LAN manager, which this will be a denial, because it's going to deny that LAN manager be used. You could use the Microsoft tool, which again is not very good, or you could use tools like AD Audit Plus or Event Log Analyzer that allow you to run alerts notifying you if LAN manager was actually attempted to be used. This is the power of true security hardening, next generation security hardening. Let's move on to our last example, resource access. Now, I didn't actually get a list of who was going to be attending this webinar, but I guarantee you there's some people from, let's say, banks. Banks have very stringent requirements for access to files. So what you need to do is you need to know who has access and who leverages that access. Now, since we know the steps, let's go look at reports. If we use Microsoft reporting, I can use iCackles or xCackles to get who has access to a particular folder. So I'm going to come back here. I am going to go to, let's go to my computer, and here I have Audit Docs, right? Audit Docs is a folder. I could come in here and look at the properties, security. I could scroll, and I could continue to scroll as I try to look at this information, right? So if I come in here and I, why am I not looking at the right information? Security, edit. So, I don't have the ability to list these out because this page doesn't change, right? So this isn't a good option. So what I could do is I could come to a command prompt, and I could do an iCackles, and iCackles has a little secret decoder ring here of exactly what the permissions are and what it can report. So if I do a iCackles for C /audit docs, I can get a list that administrators, users, Derek, and there's an owner, and I'd have to decrypt this. Not very friendly, but this is a way to report on who has permissions. The Microsoft reporting isn't very good. So how do I run reports? Well, you can run reports in a tool that's designed to actually run reports. So you'll see here that we have NTFS reports. We can look at folders. And let's say we pick software, right? So we come in here, we pick our server. We pick the folder. I do not have audit docs shared, which in almost 100% of the cases, whatever you're going to be looking at, you want shared because that's the way users have access. So I can come in here and I can get a listing on who has what level of access. Okay? So here you can see that I have the full listing as who has what level of access, and instead of some secret decoder ring, I give you the details on exactly what permissions they have. Okay? So now it becomes much easier to see and report on who has what permissions. Now, when you go and you look at folders and their permissions or files and their permissions, often you're going to find that there are groups, administrators. You need to find out who has membership in those groups. How do you do that? Well, you could go back to Active Directory users and computers. You could go to administrators. You could go to the members, and you could actually get a screenshot of this. Now remember, this does not change size, so if the list is beyond this, you're going to have to take multiple screenshots. Also, what happens when you have groups that are embedded, that are nested? Well, I can double click this and go to members, but if there's groups upon groups upon groups, well, that becomes a problem. So how do we actually generate nested groups members down to the users? Again, let's use a tool that's designed to do this. AD reports, group members. I'm going to select administrators. I'm going to make sure I look at the details. Sorry, got rid of that. So I'm going to select the details, and I want to know users and groups that are in administrators, and it will recursively go through and get me all the users that are in all the nested groups for that group. And when I want to run a report, I export it to a PDF. Using the right tool to generate reports saves you so much time. Whenever I do my training classes, I always tell everyone, I want to make lean, mean reporting machines. I want you to have more time to do other things that are more interesting than running reports on group membership. Now that we have our folders and files and who has access, we simply then analyze to who has the correct, or who should have the correct membership. Then we configure it. What do we do next? In Unison, we monitor and alert. How do we monitor? Again, you need a tool that can do this. We have a tool that can do this. AD Audit Plus. In AD Audit Plus, we have file auditing. Under file auditing, you can configure the configured servers, right? And for your file audit reports, you can look at all files that have been modified in whatever time frame that you want. And it will tell you exactly what's been modified in that time frame. Down at the details, you can find out who did what to that particular file and folder. Okay, right there. Derek did something. All right? These are the details that you need. These are the details that you want. Can you set up alerts so that when someone tries to perform some action on some file you're emailed, we actually have a tool for tracking files that gives you a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more insight. And we encourage you to go out and look at all of our tools because our tools are designed around security hardening. Our tools are designed to help you see and understand what's going on in your organization, because without a good tool, you don't know. So what have we talked about in our brief time together? We talked about the fact that security hardening is vital, but most organizations stop short. They stop at the place that they don't know what's happening after that place. And you have to monitor and alert to know what's happening. So if you actually go and you set up next generation security hardening, including monitoring and alerting, with these 3 examples that I gave you, or really any example that we give you on our security hardening site, you now have insight into exactly how things are configured and exactly what you have in place. And without it, I'm just going to be honest, you don't know what you have. And if the boss were to come in and ask you, are we secure? I hope you tell them the truth. Without monitoring and alerting, you don't know. Because if you're not monitoring the changes or being notified of the changes with an alert, you don't know. So where do we go from here? That's my email. Please email me with any questions. We've given you 2 awesome resources, our blog and our security hardening website, for you to get a grip on the security for Active Directory in your Windows servers. If you have any questions on anything that's out there, please email me. Email us. The entire AD Solutions team here at ManageEngine is really dedicated to you, our customers, and our potential customers to help you understand your environments. It's what we do. We also have some other resources available for you, so please utilize the resources. If you don't have these tools, AD Audit Plus, AD Manager Plus, File Audit Plus, please go download them and look at them. You get a free 30-day license. Put them on a virtual machine and test them out. You're going to find they're extremely easy to use and set up. So one more thing I'm going to point you to is over the next 3 weeks, we actually have some workshops. If you go to our main page, manageengine.com, and go to our events, we have some workshops that we've been doing, helping organizations better understand their tools. Over the next 3 weeks, I personally will be doing some AD Audit Plus workshops, helping organizations better utilize our tools with use cases and just better setting up the utilities. We also have them on AD Self-Service Plus, AD Manager Plus. So please, utilize the resources that we have for you. We are really here for you. So with that, I know that there have been quite a few questions answered, and I'm going to thank Karthik for taking care of those. We have an entire team here dedicated helping you, and Karthik and some others have been on the back end answering your questions. I want to thank them for that. Again, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking your time to attend, because it proves to us that you are dedicated to security in your organization. And with that, I'm going to end the webinar. We do have a webinar over the next couple of weeks. We have our workshops. We have online videos. Please come and consume the information to make sure that you're getting the best information that you can for your Active Directory environment. For Derek Melber and the entire Active Directory Solutions team here at ManageEngine, thank you. Have a great rest of your day. Until next time, I will talk to you later. Thank you very much.